Hello everybody and welcome back to another exclusive video for Novos. Today we've been going through the new season and the changes that you need to be thinking about in terms of competitive. So let's get into it. The first thing we need to be talking about is the loadout focused changes. Now we have the addition of the new burst rifle, we have the assault rifle, the ranger assault rifle being staying inside of the game, and the MK7s have been removed. So instead of assault rifles, I, in my opinion, think that the Ranger Assault Rifle is probably going to be your best choice the majority of the time. It gives you the most accurate shots, and if you want to be getting Storm Surge, it's going to get you the most bang for your buck. The Burst Rifle is a little bit awkward along range, and it gets very difficult to get used to, so you definitely want to be focusing on prioritizing one or the other. Now, because you have this very slow fire rate Assault Rifles now in the game, you need to be thinking about your secondary SMG choices. Now, it is the battle of the Combat SMG versus the Stinger SMG. Now, the Stinger SMG did get nerfed recently. The fire rate has reduced drastically, and you definitely can feel it when you're in a box-to-box fight. So, essentially, every single pro player will be using the Combat SMG every single time because it's just way too strong and shoots very, very quickly. One tip I can give you for the Combat SMG that you might not know is there's a way to negate the recoil that you have on the gun. Essentially, what you want to do as soon as you start spraying, aim all the way down and then aim back up, and that will sort of reset your recoil. And then if you just keep it in the same place, you'll just shoot at the same level the entire time at head level. It is very, very overpowered and should be utilized when you're spraying box to box at other players. The next question then is, if you're carrying an SMG, will you be required to carry a shotgun? In my opinion, probably not. Depends on your playstyle. If you're a height team, then SMG AR is all that you need. If you're a mid-gun team or maybe even a low-gun team, then you could carry your shotgun in some scenarios. If you're very focused on impact frags by dropping other players, then that can be really good for you because you can get the initial damage done. It's very hard to get eliminations that way if you get a drop down with an SMG because it takes a long time. So that is just your personal preference, but the majority of pros, they won't be carrying a shotgun this season. Now, the addition of the new item, the Cow Crusher, has changed the way that you play this game as well. Essentially, you do want this in your inventory in one of your players in the duo. One player then will be carrying a Cow Crusher in terms of utility, and then the other player, what they will be carrying is White Heels. White Heels are so important in solos and in duos because it essentially gives you free placement points. Duos is basically playing like two solos, so the more placement points you can farm as a solo by healing up in Storm, the better. You also want to have White Heels for reusing pads, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then after that, you want to have your minis, big pods, splashes, and the likes. So essentially what your loadout looks like as a player is then Assault Rifle, preferably the Ranger Assault Rifle, your Combat SMG, your utility, either the Cow Crusher or the White Heels, and then two shields, either big pots or minis or splashes and big pots, whatever you want in that situation. The next thing you want to be thinking about is the changes to Storm Surge and how it affects gameplay. Now, for those of you that don't know, Storm Surge used to work like this. Essentially, you took 25 damage every 5 seconds if you were below the Storm Surge threshold. Now, that change has made it a little bit easier for Surge and upped it to every 10 seconds. So you take 25 damage every 10 seconds. So essentially, you can out-heal Storm Surge very, very easily now. One Storm Surge tick is equal to a mini, so that's basically a mini every 10 seconds. If you have 10 minis in total, you can survive a minute each as a duo if you have 6 minis in total, which is a little bit ridiculous, so you can heal up that way. Splashes, or 6 splashes, means you can effectively survive Surge for 5 ticks as a duo, so having 5 splashes will mean you can survive it as a duo together if you splash together, which means you can survive for about 50 seconds. And medkits can also be utilized for about 30 seconds of healing, so 75 damage in total before you need to pop one, which will make it very, very overpowered as well. So you can heal out Storm Surge, and it's actually a little bit harder now to get Storm Surge because we're no longer in that MK7 meta, that high fire rate meta where you're 3-2-1ing player from a close range. So you're going to be using long range AR tags. So if you do struggle with Surge, don't worry, you can heal it if you just stock up on that. But you need to be focused on getting that towards 4th zone as well, so don't get too lazy in that sense. The third thing that changed this season, and for some of you this is more relevant than others, but the lack of Spider-Man. Now, the Spider-Man gauntlets did get removed, so if you were a Spider-Man player in the last season, it will make it very, very difficult for you to adapt and sort of change your playstyle. And you basically need to rely on other players for your own movement. If you were a Spider-Man player, this is what you need to be thinking about. Higher layers in half and half will be your best friend. You always want to be a very high layer when you're looking for high pads, because people can reuse pads. You want to be able to reuse pads from other teams. So being higher means you can scout out and have a little bit more information on the teams around you. Secondly, white heroes, like we mentioned before, in the loadout section are vitals for pad reusal. So you want to be finding those white heroes and using them in that half and half or first moving so that you can find the pads and then tank a little bit of storm, because people ahead of you might use a launch pad, so you can heal up that way. Last but not least, the sprinting mechanic that got added very recently will help you save 1 or 2 builds in the late game. Very, very important as well is making use of the mantling and sprinting mechanics, because 1 or 2 builds over the entirety of a 4 to 5 minute end game can add up in that final moving zone. So focus on using that effectively and try to find some players to VOD you that do that. I do recommend someone like Seti, for example, who really likes using those new mechanics, those mantling, those climbing, those sliding and jumping mechanics in order to be the most efficient possible. Last but not least, let's talk about layering against the new items. Now, cow crashers are going to be essentially the biggest meta item in the game. They're very overpowered. Essentially, you can't build a wall, you can't build a ramp, you can't build a cone when someone throws a cow crasher at the wall near your box. So essentially, what you want to be focused on is higher layering, because the higher you are, the better it is, since players need to place a floor right next to the wall that you're at. So it'll be tough for them to get close to you if you're on a higher layer compared to them. So always try to play a little bit higher in order to prevent that if you have a lot of materials, if you don't need to get an impact frag. Secondly, you need to think about your built-in muscle memory. So it's very, very easy for you to sort of panic and hold a wall as soon as someone throws a cow crusher. So what you want to be focusing on is instantly just practicing the muscle memory of editing down or editing to the left or the right as soon as it happens. You can practice this scenario with a teammate in creative and just instantly react to the sound of the cow crusher, because it makes a very loud sound, so you can instantly react and edit down in that situation. Third, you want to be thinking about keeping the space. So you always want to give yourself about a gap of 2 builds between yourself and the enemy, because any larger than 1 build makes it a little bit awkward for them to come across and throw a cow crasher at your base, because it exposes them. Because if they throw a cow crasher at you, it means that they can also not build around themselves, so they have to throw it at range in most situations. Last but not least, it's up to the back tart player to be aware. If you notice a team making a big edit, that means they're going to throw a cow crasher, because you can't really throw them out of a window. They sort of get stuck. So have the back player always be aware of the layer that you're on and the teams around you, because it makes it then harder for them to throw it at you if you're counter spraying and you know that it's coming. Those are basically the main things you need to be thinking about in competitive changes of this new season. Hopefully it gives you a little bit more insight into what you need to focus on in order to get the best practice and also the best preparation possible for this upcoming FNCS. Have a good one, guys. Good luck.